So thank you again for all the very interesting presentations. I could see one common agenda in the presentations, really. I think we were all dealing with kind of energizing the city, making the city people-friendly, and particularly talking about kind of waterfront development and how to make waterfronts active. And I would quite like to try to direct our discussion a little bit in that direction. Maybe I should give an opportunity first to Casey, to briefly introduce herself.
My name is Casey, and I also one of the members for Hong Kong IUD, and it's really a great honor to have this wonderful speaker today. And to respond to the presentation, actually, I would like to, being an architect and also urban designer, also part-time academic, so I would like to also respond as a citizen and also the user of the space. So not very long time ago, I visited Melbourne, and then when I was there, the first day, I was told to visit Federal Square and to enjoy the park and to enjoy the outdoor space and to have a coffee there and then really spend the whole afternoon there. So I was thinking when I was sitting there, visitors come to Hong Kong often told to be 8 p.m., 8 p.m., go to TST and then take a picture of the beautiful skyline. So I believe that open space is always really important for people to enjoy it. And is more important or even equally important as a kind of creating a postcard image. So I think for Dr. Dovey's presentation, it's very inspiring. And also I would like to ask, what is the kind of the key stakeholder or decision maker for making a successful city waterfront project from your presentation or from your experience?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I think we come back to that in a moment.
Sure.
I also would like to introduce Donald Choi. He's also joined us. I think he's been very busy in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think I have been on both sides of the fence. So, I have been on the consultant side. I'm an architect, also a Hong Kong IUD member. I am now working as from the client side. So I think it is important. I think the interests are aligned. I mean, good urban design is good business. Also, I mean, from the waterfront perspective, I think Kim has mentioned it very well. It really needs to be accessible. Hong Kong has one of the most beautiful coastline, but unfortunately, many of the waterfront is not accessible. I think we need to remedy that for sure. I don't know how West Kowloon has catered for the participants and citizens' activities to be able to approach right down to water. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that is what we need. I think, if we allow people accessibility to the water, and also we will allow free activity, as you have mentioned, spontaneously, that could happen at the waterfront, then that would actually activate and give vitality to the whole coastline.
Okay, thank you, Donald. Actually, I would like to start my questions to Li Xiang. I would argue, you were talking about smart cities and also environmental friendly cities. I would actually argue that Hong Kong is probably one of the smartest cities in the world in certain aspects. And it has always been something which I was very fascinated about. I mean, we are a city with a very low carbon transport footprint. In fact, we only have a very low car ownership in Hong Kong. We only have about 10% car ownership. And I think about 90% of us go to the office by public transport, which is quite phenomenal. And I think it has not really been planned like that. It is more a result of the topography of Hong Kong. We were basically forced to develop along the coastlines. And then the metro systems were also being placed along the coastlines and made it very efficient. It means commuting becomes easy, it means you have very mixed neighborhoods, it means you have your school close by and your workplace close by, which I think is a very interesting model, not necessarily a planned one. And I think I would like you to maybe just briefly explain how you think, I mean, Singapore differs in that sense from Hong Kong, but they also have that ambition for a very transport-friendly city. Maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, those of you who have been to Singapore know that we are very top-down as far as, well, needless to say, of course. So it's such a contrast with Hong Kong, but I think being top-down, the advantage is that very large-scale infrastructure could be effected, or rather completed in very short time. But the weakness is that do people naturally gravitate towards a more sustainable lifestyle? Not really. The number of car ownership is still very high, and I will tell you very brutally frank that car is seen as an extravagant item because it's very expensive and people still want to own one, regardless of the excellent, and have one, regardless of the excellent transportation system. So I think that in that sense, Singaporeans are not very smart. But I think having a smart government helps to overcome that. So I think Hong Kong is a great example that you have people who actually make use of very limited resources, but do things a smart way. That's the right way to go.
Okay, I mean, that leads me to my next question. When I looked at your presentation, you were talking about a whole number of development along the river, and then also about the kind of lack of master plan or kind of very conceptual master plan along the harbour. And you didn't quite, I didn't quite understand where the uses of these buildings came from. The first ones you were mentioning, and what I thought was particularly interesting was we all know Nation Square. That's probably one of the most successful ones of the project you mentioned, from my perspective. And I think it's partially also related to the connectivity, the transport. I would be interested to hear your views.
Okay, well, Docklands was designed initially on the basis that it would all be privately funded, so there was no transport or anything. But a lot of public funding, indeed over $1 billion Australian dollars, became the public funding that was added afterwards, which gets back to my point about trying to capture the capital gains. We had public land, and we didn't capture the capital gains, therefore we didn't have the funding. It had to be found somewhere else to add the transport and other things afterwards, and so that was a problem. Federation Square, I think, and this is getting back to your question to some degree, it's not so much the key agent or person involved, it's the key decision that I think worked there was taken out of the political cycle. I think the politicisation of urban design projects, and I can only really speak for Australia, but I think this is global to some degree, has become over-politicised, that politicians are onto the fact that highly visible, iconic urban design projects have a great deal of political capital attached to them, and therefore they hook them into, and large infrastructure projects as well, and they want to put their name on them and badge them. And then if it doesn't get fully built, one of the buildings I showed was only half built, and it was a museum, and it was half built and there was an election, and the new government came in and said, well, that's their museum, that's got their name on it, we'll stop that construction, we'll turn it into an exhibition centre and put our name on it. And that's what happened. Now, in my view, what this leads to is an interesting condition, which is one of real uncertainty. I don't think there is any easy return to old-fashioned master planning, because the process is just much too uncertain. We have to engage in a much more creative and adaptive process, it seems to me, where we don't really know, and it's a little bit like these buildings you're looking at, where you build the basement not knowing what's going to happen on top. I think that is increasingly the condition of urban design, and we need to get on with it.
Okay. Duncan, I have a couple of questions for you as well, actually. Obviously, we've been quite deeply involved in the culture district, and obviously are now also involved in the M+, and we have embraced that scheme and the idea behind it. In fact, what we had developed initially was not too dissimilar. But I am a little bit, the last point you've made, I'm a little bit uncertain about that, the segregation between transport and people. I think Hong Kong went through these iterations where there was a desire to segregate people from cars. And I think it's primarily driven by the aspiration to have a zero accidents on the road. I think that has resulted in a okay, let's use a more modest word, in an aspiration to segregation, and it resulted in things like Kowloon development, for example, where the ground level around Kowloon is actually sterilized. It's been given over to transport essentially. And then there was a change of mind, and people realized actually groundscape should be there for the people, and the cultural district is kind of the reverse. The ground level is now being given to the people, but the transport is pushed below ground. I think there's some challenges with this. I think, when you go to cultural facilities, you arrive below ground. I'm not sure whether that is necessarily the best experience. Also, the roads adjacent to the cultural district, to be able to go underneath, they have these huge ramps now going down, which has an impact on the urban environment behind. So I think the basement has its benefits. No doubt you have the loading there, you have a lot of functions there, but I'm not convinced that a cultural district can't accommodate some vehicles.
I agree with you entirely. I honestly, if I was to go back 10 years and have the chance to redesign it, I wouldn't have gone this way. It's hugely expensive. The management problems that we're anticipating are enormous. We have to put in ventilation because, of course, cars, trucks, buses. We have to deal with the signage problems. How do you get from point A to point B when you don't have the normal references of the buildings? So you have to deal with the signage. We have to deal with the issues of people popping up here thinking, oh, I need to be over there, so I have to be able to move them somehow, presumably at the podium level. I agree, it's a hugely problematic design, but that's what I've got. So what am I going to do? Am I going to cry about it? No, I'm just going to get on with it. I'm going to do the best I can to overcome those problems, and I'm going to deliver something that'll work. We've got to be pragmatic. That's the key word in the whole presentation. Not the basement, not the separation of the cars and people. It's about being pragmatic and delivering on a concept that we've inherited.
I fully subscribe to that. I'm more interested in Hong Kong, as a model, right? We always had the transport-oriented developments here, and I still want to challenge somehow and change the perception as to how far the segregation between uses should go. So I was just using this as an example. Yeah. There's actually, sorry if I may, there's one other issue I would like to talk to you about, which we were involved with when we did the master plan. The promenade. I think the promenade is quite wide. It's 20 meters, I think, if I remember that correctly. And I think the activities we're talking about and the kind of liveliness, that also requires a certain level of activation, so to speak. Are there some plans for that? How that could happen along the promenade?
We opened the nursery park in September of last year, and part of the logic behind that was to trial different forms of activation within an open space. The park has all the elements within 1.2 hectares that the 13 plus hectares plus all the promenade will have. It has a promenade, it has all these features. And what we've been doing over the last 8 months is running different programs to test it out. We have programs within the park area, we have programs on the peripheral areas, we have people coming to fish, getting into the sea, we have people coming and doing sports activities. We're trying all different things precisely to ensure that it is activated. And it comes back to one of the things that I had in the presentation. We want public art. We want street performers. We want formal programs. We showed the film nights that we're already doing. But we also want the informal. Because if it's too formal and it's too regulated, that's not what people tell us they want. They want to be just able to turn up and lie on the grass. That's it. They don't have any ambition beyond that. And I want to say, great, do that. But if you're interested, just round the corner on the waterfront, there's a little bit of a performance going on. If you get bored with the grass, come along. Another example, we have what we call reading in the park. So we have an arrangement with a local non-governmental agency. They bring books, and people can borrow books and just read in the park. But if they want to keep the book, they have to swap another book. So we're multiplying the benefits. And it's all about activation. And I agree with you. That's the key to making this a destination, because it's stuck out there. It's not exactly considered to be accessible. So you've got to make it an attractive destination.
There's another element to activation, which I was wondering whether Donald maybe could explain a little bit more. I'm wondering about also things like cafes or even some retail or some other level of activities. There's always a bit of a concern, I think, in Hong Kong that could take over, right, as a sort of a commercial agenda. But what's your view?
Well, obviously, I mean, we need to look at the consumers' behavior and what they need. I mean, diversity and inclusiveness, they are the key. But I want to actually pick up a theme that Lee has touched upon, the technology impact on city and urban designs. I look at a lot of our design today. It seems that we are basing our design on the past technology, and that is a problem for us. Even on the separation of car and pedestrian and so on, we are still thinking that in 10, 20 years' time, chauffeur-driven car is still the dominant, problem, or that we need parking for our car. But I think with the shared economy, the technology progress of driverless car and so on, probably most people do not need to own a car. They need to, yes, have the service of a car, but then, I mean, that is exactly where, from point A to point B, and the car will be used 24 hours. We don't even need a parking lot, for that type of technology.
Driverless car.
Exactly. So if I'm building a huge basement, car park, probably I think it's time to look at how to convert it now to other useful function, because
you come in
where it needed to be built, and in a very short time, that function will be obsolete.
Okay. Casey, I would like to ask you a question as well, which is related to what we're doing here on the harbourfront. Personally, I feel that the approach for the cultural district was a very positive one to develop a master plan. I know it took a long time, right, but we've looked at different options, and I think it all grew around us what the right approach should be, and we did invite international experts for this. Do you think that would be a model we should be adopting for other parts of Hong Kong as well?
Yeah, to this question, actually, I was also thinking about the previous section. So it's not about design, it's about people's behavior. But I will argue that both are very important because design has its own influence for the place, how we make the place, and then how people use it. So I think for your question, or for also responding to West Kowloon Cultural District, I think one point that Dr. Dovey mentioned is engage water, like how to actually see the people to enjoy the waterfront, and then for people in Hong Kong, West Kowloon is one of the key location, very strategically situated at the most beautiful site in Hong Kong. So the waterfront edge, I think it really needs like everyone and inviting everyone to come and use. It's a design, but it's also designed to be non-designed for the people here.
Okay, thank you. Shall we maybe open to some questions from the floor? Do we have time still? No, not much, but maybe one or two.
Thank you, Stefan. A question for Mr. Pescott, please. You mentioned don't believe the hype, and we had your fairly stump speech there that you have to roll out for lots of these presentations. I don't believe you. Now, I was there building West Kowloon Reclamation back in the early 90s. I watched it sit there empty for 25 years. I've done a few little activities and things on there. In the context of what we've heard about Melbourne and the disappointment of delivering the Docklands, what we've heard about delivering Central Waterfront, how can we and the public actually have faith that all those things that you say will be delivered and you want to produce will be produced? Because I don't believe they will. I believe it'll come down to the lowest common denominator, as it always does in Hong Kong.
Trust me. Come on, guys. No, honestly, the best way that we can demonstrate what we're going to do is by doing it. Because quite honestly, we spent almost 10 years debating it. We spent previously 10 years debating another model. We were created as an authority by ordinance in 2008, and we didn't start building until 2012-13. You know, we're still talking. So my job, as I see it, is to stop all the talking and all the debate and just get on and build it. And in doing so, then I can demonstrate to you that we'll deliver. Because honestly, we can keep talking, and I will be sitting here in a year's time, you'll ask me the same question, and I'll still be saying, trust me. But you won't trust me until I demonstrate and deliver. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's why the C2 will be delivered on time, slightly over budget. The M+ will be delivered on time. The park will be delivered on time. The lyric will be delivered on time. And most importantly, all of the content, all of the programming, and all of the activation will also be delivered as part of that project. It's the only way I can do it. Because until we do that, skepticism everywhere, and it's quite right. As I keep saying, don't believe the hype, see for yourself.
What's happening?
I think a large part of what's at stake here is what we learn from what it is that we do. In urban design knowledge has not gone very far. We don't understand an awful lot about how cities work yet. And part of the problem is that the city is our laboratory. And when we do experiments on it, they're very expensive. And most often, when they fail, we don't actually analyse why. We don't do much research on what went wrong. But we are building a knowledge base on how to get it right, and we've got to do a lot more experimenting and a lot more creative experimenting. So yes, please deliver on time, but then do the research. Do the research and own up to what went wrong.
I think this was a very good question.
Yeah, I think sometimes we live in an age where we think everything's going to happen tomorrow. Certainly not in the case of city. So like the Great Parisian Plan, you know, Haussmann, how long did he take to actually realize the beautiful boulevards? And even that people hate him until much later. So Duncan, press on, don't give up. Maybe 100 years later, they will erect a statue of you. And they will thank you for your hard work.
Yeah, it's happening. I can assure you of that. Do we have another question? Okay then.
Maybe
All right, may I just...
one more comment.
One more comment.
Very
we
quickly.
can accommodate.
Because I was thinking about the previous presentation talking about educating the young generation, even from the younger age. But I think it's also very important to create a space for them to experience, to enjoy it, and then instead of from the text, from kind of the lecture, from any classroom or any forum. But I think for people daily life, they can enjoy that. The people will realize what is a good urban space.
Thank you. That was very nice closing words. I don't think I have to add much to that. Anyway, I thought it was a very exciting session, and I hope we can all make a very good contribution to what's happening, particularly in Hong Kong and along the harbour front. Can I ask for a hand for our panelists, please?